Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Design Rescue Show, where we explore the unique experiences of fellow design rescuers and learn about the choices they've made that have shaped their paths to success. I am David Block, and joining us today is illustrative designer Von Glitschka. Welcome, Von.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Let me start by talking a little bit about your career, your biography. Let's go way back. You attended the Seattle Art Institute, class of '86. You've been a senior graphic designer, an art director, an illustrative designer, and of course, while working in the industry, you have been a professor, college professor. You wrote the book on vector design called Vector Basic Training. You have an amazing YouTube channel for tutorials called People Love Process, and you run Glitschka Studios, where you've gotten to work with a lot of big name companies like Microsoft, Disney, Pepsi, Kellogg's, Major League Baseball, just to name a few. Does that sound about right?
That's pretty much sums it up well.
Okay, excellent. Well, before we begin, what I'd like to do is I'd really like to give you an opportunity to share with everybody where they can find you, where people can find you online, either your web address, your YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah. Well, to get all that information would be my website, of course, but my last name seems difficult. It really isn't. It's pronounced and spelled the way you'd pronounce it, Glitschka Studios. But because of that, people were always misspelling it. And so I also have if you just type in vonster.com, it'll take you to my website, and then you can find all the other social contacts that way.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. So then let's begin. My first question is, so you've had an amazing career. It's been several decades, and I want to go back again to the Art Institute. So as somebody who also graduated from the Art Institute, I am curious about your experience, your education there, and how it shaped your early career. What were some of the key takeaways from your time at the Art Institute, and how did those experiences influence your approach to design?
I was in art school in high school when a lady from the Seattle Art Institute came in and showed us a student portfolio of work. And that really intrigued me because I know I didn't see myself going to regular college because I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do at that point. Well, actually, there was one thing I was interested in, that is I wanted to get into film. Me and a friend of mine would always make films growing up, and but there was no internet at the time, so we couldn't figure out how you do that. We went to the career counselor, told her, and she couldn't find anything. So the next thing that showed up was this lady from the Art Institute, and that intrigued me. So I told my parents about it, and we drove up there. I toured the school. Once again, I didn't really understand the full breadth of what design is all about and how it's used for advertising, marketing, and everything in between. But I decided that's where I wanted to go. So that's about a year later is when I went off to art school. And because it was in Seattle, they had an agreement with Seattle University up on Capitol Hill. And so we got to live in the dorms and have that kind of college life experience, but go to art school, not regular college. So in that respect, it was like college, but we're just learning visual communications. So the thing that intimidated me the most, because everything at that time was traditional, and we started going over doing layouts. And back then, when you did layouts and you had to create columns of type for whatever you're laying out, it's like you had to do math, and you had to do math to figure out all the the typesetting, and I'm just going, okay, I don't like this. I don't think I want to do layout and design like that. But other aspects I enjoyed. I enjoyed illustration class, and we had a branding class. That one was pretty fun. I liked advertising in terms of the campaign and coming up with concepts, and that's what I thought I wanted to get into. And then slowly, because this is 4 years after I first used the Mac 2 when it came out as a freshman in high school. Um, the last year, like halfway through the last year, the school bought all these Apple Lisas. I don't know if you remember those computers. It didn't have color on the screen. It looked like that old game Battle Zone with vector lines that were green. And we had to create an on-screen graphic and literally like write 2 pages of code just to be able to do that. And so uh, I was going, this is interesting. It's like eventually I think everything's going to be more digital, but I learned traditional. My first jobs were ironically at sportswear companies. So I did a lot of shooting on stack cameras and manually separating film and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's great. So you've been a seasoned designer now. Now that was a while ago. That was when was that? Back in the 90s, right? The early 90s.
Yeah, everything I just explained happened like between it took me about a year after graduating to actually find a job. So we're talking between 98 to early 90s is
Okay.
what I did all that. But um I kind of got burnt out after a couple of years, and I left the job at the sportswear company I'd been working at for a couple of years, and uh kind of went and worked for a company out of Southern California. And they sent us on a year-long tour where we went to high schools and junior highs, and we were setting up these multimedia presentations. And it was on um, kind of talking about the dangers of drug abuse and that kind of stuff. And it was different. I just didn't want to do anything creative. I don't know why I was burnt out, but I was, and did that for a year. That's actually how I met my wife.
Mm.
And then got tired of doing that and said I wanted to go back. Got my job back, work there. And then after that, I was offered another job down in Oregon, and that's where I've been living ever since. And well, no, I take that back. There was a period of 3 years where I moved to California and worked for Upper Deck, but other than that, I've been based out of Oregon.
Which, by the way, I love that. I love that you worked for Upper Deck for a while. I was a huge client of theirs for a long time. So after that time, so you know, you of course you've been a seasoned designer now. You've had a lot of projects. You've had many opportunities to work with great companies, challenging projects. Could you talk about a pivotal project that you got to work on that ended up sort of changing your career path? Your turn was like a turning point for your professional path.
There was a couple things that helped me in that regard. One was I always got these mailings from a certain an artist representative. My name is Scott Hull. When I was working at a small agency in Oregon back in the early 90s, and I always liked him. I thought he promoted the people he represented well, but um, it wasn't until 2003 that I went to an illustration conference, and I knew he was going to be there. So I went out of my way to go up to him and kind of pitch him in person. And he kind of blew me off. And so, but it got his attention. So he started following me for that year. And the next year he approached me and asked if he could represent me. So I like bringing that up to him, saying, remember when you blew me off, you know? And but we've known each other now for, wow, it's been 20 years now. About He's been my rep. And the way an art, and I was a little different than all of his other creatives because they were pure blood kind of illustrators, where I did design and illustration. So I kind of had to train Scott of sorts to understand um, how he could find me work. Like, this is the type of work I'd be ideal for agencies who need illustrative design. And once he locked into that, that's where I started landing projects that fundamentally changed the way I marketed myself and promoted myself. Um, Back in the day, he would do workbook pages. So, and then he stopped doing them for whatever reason, but I kept doing them. And I did that for about 8 years until the economy tanked in 2008 or whatever.
Right.
And I decided, I can't really afford to drop 1,500 on this workbook page. And so I didn't. And then I was afraid, well, nobody's going to call me now, so maybe it was a dumb decision, only to
Just to
find out.
explain, workbook is a source book for
Yeah,
illustrators, designers, right?
yeah. Just think of it as a catalog of visual images. And usually at that time, it was art buyers who a creative director would tell we're interested in this style, find somebody, have them quote the project. And then you usually competing with 2 or 3 other people when you do that. But nothing really changed. I still got the work. And it was right about the time when social media started coming on the scene. And I knew that the days of source books were like, kind of, there's still one around, but I don't know any creative director that uses it the way they used it back then. So
Yeah.
all my leads come through social media, and people, ironically, word of mouth is still really good. You work with one person, another creative director sees what you did for the creative director you work with, and then they refer you, or they move on to another agency, and hopefully they call you up when they have work that aligns with what you can do for them. So it's pretty relationship and network based. And
Right.
you never want to burn bridges. That's the thing. They could
It's
be
a small world.
frustrating to work with, but you just have to stick it out.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, because you want it to be fun, but a lot of times on big projects, it's anything but. Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I'd like to switch gears just a little bit here. And in 2002, you started Glitschka Studios, and that was a one-man studio back then, right? Or did you have partners?
No, that was just me.
Yeah.
I was art director at a local firm, and I'd gotten sick and called in sick on that Friday before the Monday that I came in early to catch up. I was still kind of sick, but I came in early, and my boss and his brother-in-law that worked there were in the studio already, and they just he intercepted me, handed me a check, and said, we're going to let you go. Well, come to find out later, it was, he found an old email in my deleted emails, so he was snooping around.
Right.
That a firm in town had approached me to hire me. I'd already turned it down. I wasn't interested. Come to find out, which I didn't know at the time, was all those employees at the other firm were his ex-employees. So he
Oh
saw
my.
me, he thought I was going to jump ship like everybody else did. So he preemptively fired me. And then he had to come up with an excuse when that wasn't the case. And yeah, we've reconciled since then, because I was asked to be on a local college board for their creative program, and he was the president of it, but the chair asked me to be on it, and then he got nervous. But yeah, we've made up since then, so it's no big deal. But
Once again, it's a small world.
yeah, so
Right.
basically I got fired.
Yeah.
That's how I started my job. I called my wife and I go, well, um I just got fired. And I go, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's no jobs here in town that I want to work at. Salem's a pretty insular community. It still is. Creative opportunities in Portland, but commuting is like traffic is huge here. I wouldn't want to do that. And my wife goes, well, you've talked about going out on your own. Why don't you just try it? And so she was at least supporting me in that regard. So um, that's what I did. Took pretty much any job I could get locally, joined a local networking group. That helped a little bit. And then as I used to listen to old podcast, can't remember the guy who did it. He's a marketing guy, but he made the point of as you grow your business, if you get a new client, then drop a grinder client, meaning low pay, high expectations. And that's what I started doing. And just slowly just taking on finding better jobs, making better connections, learning all about running your own business, which I'd never done. And that's when I plugged in one of my small business clients. I branded a little cafe, and he suggested, hey, you should join the local community college small business group. And the guy who runs it is a mentor. He'll help you figure out, he'll get to know your business and help you figure out how to structure everything from invoicing to paperwork and everything in between. And I got to know him, and over about 5 years, it's only a 1 year program and then you're done. But I stayed in it 5 years because we became friends. And he showed up, and that's what he did. He really got to know what I did, how I work, what I'm doing. And then he said, okay, this is your invoicing. You need to do this and this. And he became a mentor for me, helped me kind of establish my business and get it running. So that helped a lot. So I highly recommend that. And he used to be a CEO of Gallo Wine. And a marketing guy at Coca-Cola. So he knew what he was talking about. And he goes, look, the same principles that work for them work for you. It's just you scale it down. And so he helped me a lot to really kind of put the focus where I needed to.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, you know, as a creative myself, I'm really bad on the business side of things, and so I've partnered with my father, who's been in business for decades and has had successful businesses. So it's good. It's always a good idea to network and to partner with those people that can help move you forward.
Yeah.
Excellent. So now also with Glitschka Studios, so that you also have been working alongside your daughter for many years on and off. And
Yeah.
can you talk about that relationship, that business relationship?
Yeah, she graduated a little over 6 years ago from the local design program. I used to teach adjunct there for about 5 or 6 years prior to that. She was in my last class, so I got to give her a bad time. Where I'm reviewing student work and I get to hers and I go, "Did you even read my book?" And she'd go, "Knock it off," So that was kind of fun. But after she graduated, I wasn't intending to hire her. I wanted her to kind of go get some experience and see things outside of her familiar realm of influence. And uh, but like I said earlier, Salem doesn't have a lot of creative opportunities. I mean, most of my clients are out of state. They're not even in Oregon, let alone Salem. I do have one really good client here in Salem, but I just landed them at the beginning of this year. But anyway, when she graduated, it just dawned on me one day, okay, so I go talk to my wife and I say, hey, could you talk to our CPA and ask him if we can afford to hire an employee? And she came back and said, yes. And so I said, what did you think if I hired Savannah? And she worked with me for a little over 5 years. I had to lay her off in February of this year because she kind of got diagnosed with tendonitis about, it's almost been 3 years ago now. And for about a 2-year period, she could barely work on anything because of that. And because she's my daughter, I kept paying her salary, and that's probably not the smartest business move I ever made. So yeah, she's on her own now, but I gave her one of my clients that she always did the work because she loved doing it. And so she's continuing to work with them. I've passed on projects to her that I just either didn't want to do, or I thought she is a better fit than I was. And that's turned into some cool opportunities for her. So she's learning the ropes now on running her own business. And she's still on my site because I consider her a creative partner. We're working on a brand character right now for it's basically the European equivalent of Mr. Clean. And we've been working on it since June. We work together in tandem on those things. I throw stuff in front of her to have her art direct me at times, and then I pay for her time to do that if I need it. And so we've there's a friend that we both met through Adobe Max at a workshop that I spoke at. And he works for a cool company. It does licensing products for like Star Wars and all kinds of stuff. And me and Savannah worked on 2 Star Wars hats. They're doing embroidery. They just asked for another one. So I have to get that done by next Tuesday. But Savannah does the sketching. I have her do crude color mock-ups. She uses Clip Studio Paint to do most for drawing digitally on her iPad. And then I build out the vector art. And on those, she's getting the larger portion of the cut because I think she's doing the hardest part. For me, building vector art's not that big a deal, but sometimes I don't have the time to really work out a drawing. And fundamentally speaking, Savannah's a better drawer than I am. So I take advantage of that whenever I can. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And side note, my son graduated high school 2 years ago. He was in my class for 4 years. And unfortunately, I think he's going a different direction, but we'll see what happens with the future. So anyway, I'd like to kind of change gears just a little bit and switch and talk to about People Love Process.
Sure.
So, it's clear that you've been an educator just because of the way that you do your videos. You got this really easygoing kind of tone. It seems like you don't really assume that your audience understands everything, because you do take time to go into details and explain what you're doing, not necessarily so that they can follow you. I get the impression that you just want to make sure that they understand how you're accomplishing what you're setting out to accomplish. And that I love your videos for that. It makes it easy. In fact, I use them in my class in some of my assignments from time to time. So for instance, in the video that came out just this morning, in fact, I saw that one. You go into the reasoning for creating tolerances to control the weight and line weight and spacing and between elements. And I love that you covered that. I talk about that often, and it's super important. So I'm curious, do you choose your tutorial topics based on current trends, or do you get feedback from your audience, or do you just do it, just like areas of design that you're interested in?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Sometimes if people have a question about something specifically, whether it's a style or how to pull off this or that, then I definitely consider I've done movies based off of that. Many times I like to describe it as the audience is the victim of just what is intriguing to me. If I focused only on I don't know, trends and stuff like that, then there's a lot of trends that I don't care about. And it's like, it's hard for me to do content if it's something that doesn't interest me. It's like, to make it sustainable, I think I try to just make it fun. And it all goes back to when I was asked to teach in the local college. I'd never taught before. I didn't even know what a syllabus was when I started. And I was asking the chair, I'm going, well, like, how do I do this? I've never done this before. And she just said, you'll figure it out. And I was sitting at home working on a project and thought, well, I should just take this project I'm actually doing work on, bring it in and walk the students through it, because it kind of aligned with what the assignment was for them. And when I did that, it just kind of, the light turned on for a lot of them. And so I said, hey, I think that's a good way to handle it. And so nobody owned illustrationclass.com. So I bought that domain back then. It's still associated with, it'll forward you to people of now, but I started putting these tutorials together where I literally had a tripod next to my desk with a camera on it, and I'd take pictures at certain stages or screen grabs. And then I'd write notes. I had a friend in Mexico who would do Spanish translations for me. And I put together these tutorials, which are just numbered images and notes, and upload them. And everybody started downloading them. And it got the attention of then I was asked to talk at the How conference, and they wanted me to talk on illustrative design. So I just told a bunch of funny stories, showed designs that represent that. And I was approached by a publisher, and her name was Nikki for New Writer. And she wanted me to write a book on Illustrator. And I go, well, what do you mean? There's a lot of books on Illustrator out there. Well, like Illustrator, whatever version it was at the time. And I go, no. And she goes, what do you mean? I go, no, because 1 year that's its lifespan, then it's outdated. Why would I do that? I'm going, and she kept hounding me for a whole year. And I said, if you let me write it the way I want to write it, then I'll do it. And she goes, well, what do you mean? And I explained it to her that I wanted video component to it. I don't want to cover every feature in Adobe Illustrator, because frankly, you don't need to know all the features. You can learn those as you go along, but let's focus on the fundamentals. And they finally went for it. It was kind of a painful process to go through with their editors. It's like, because they're so used to writing books that are on whatever version of Illustrator. And I kept mine very generic, saying, hey, I don't care if you use Illustrator or whatever the other open source vector apps out there. Adobe doesn't own vector technology, it's open source. And so I went into the history of vectors, the math behind it, principles to keep in mind, and it kind of blew up. And it's been published in 7 languages. I updated it 4 years after the fact, just to improve stuff, because I had done content for Linda at the time, and I kind of learned better ways I should do things and teach. And so now I have had, well, it's still up on LinkedIn Learning. If you go to that platform and search for something called DVG Lab, that is essentially what People Love is. But for whatever reason, I still don't know the reason. Nobody can rationally explain it to me. LinkedIn, when they were bought out by Microsoft, the bean counters decided they didn't want to pay me royalty on my drawing vector graphics. And I said, well, then I can't afford to keep doing this. Right. Then why would I do it for free? You're $1 billion company, you know. I know how much you make, because I know the percentage they're supposed to pay me, and I see it listed, but they never actually paid it. And so I had to pull it a couple of years ago and decided to put it for free on YouTube instead. And I'm kind of glad I did, because it's so much more fun interacting with people who watch the content, where it's such a closed entity kind of behind a paywall in LinkedIn that you can't even interact with people, and you don't know who they are. I didn't like that. I like interacting with people and say, look, if you still don't understand it, send me the file you're talking about and I'll take a look at it. So I do that kind of stuff all the time. It's just fun. If something doesn't make sense to me, I need to figure out the best way to communicate it. So once it's clear in my head, then I'm pretty confident it's going to communicate right to other people. So that's where I always try to get stuff. That's how I came up with the whole kind of deconstructive process I use on most of them. Although I've introduced the over the shoulder one where you see me build it as if you're sitting in my studio watching me. So sometimes those go pretty smooth, sometimes they don't. I have a
But
new
either way, that's
series.
helpful. Either way, that's formative, right?
Yeah.
Informative.
And I came up with a new series the movie will go live at the end of, well, it's just a 3-minute short video to explain it. Um, it'll be creative challenges. So I'll give the viewers a topic, and then they have about 30 days to create something in vector form. And I don't put parameters on it or say it has to be this style or that style. I just give them the topic. And then if they send me their source file or a PDF or a high res raster image so I can see it, then I'll work that into the video that I put up showing my solution, and then I'll review everybody's work who submit. So that's going to be a new one. I'm going to be trying this next year. I just like being able to try different formats. That was always really hard. I've had ideas that I've pitched to LinkedIn, but they're pretty reserved in terms of how they like things being done. One is, and I might bring this to YouTube eventually, is I had an idea, and the old producer I used to work with there was awesome. Before they got, it all happened when they got bought out by Microsoft, because I could pitch somebody, go, that's a great idea, let's do it, and we'd do it. And people were surprised that it took off. Well, the one idea I had was brand salvage, and he approved it, but then he moved to go on to Creative Live, and then he's now at Google with helping with doing creative training there. But it's like it would be to take a real world client who can't afford to rebrand but really needs to rebrand, and I was going to do one a quarter, and it'd be me donating those services, but then really kind of helping them transform their business. So I want to see if I can bring that to YouTube, but I'm kind of planning on getting a couple friends involved, a marketing person, just so I don't want to, I want each of them to, then that way they can figure out a way to package that kind of information. And I don't want it to be a drain on their resources or mine. And, but I think it'd be a fun way to just communicate in another way on a platform like that.
Absolutely. What a great idea. Actually, that's a really, really good idea. I probably grab a lot of attention from businesses who are looking to, who are looking to make that change, but don't know where to begin,
Yeah.
kind of to see the process.
What's funny is I've gone to conferences where there's a lot of people that I know who do content for LinkedIn Learning or Skillshare for that matter. And the dirty little secret with all of them is when they can't figure something out, guess where they go to figure it out? They go to YouTube and they just search and find somebody who covers it, and they go, oh, that's right. I do the same thing. It's like, so I'm kind of surprised that YouTube, they have YouTube TV, but I'm surprised they haven't defined their own learning platform type thing with YouTube. Um,
Yeah, you're right.
I think they could put a serious dent in a lot of the competitors, I think, if they did that. That's just something I've wondered. So YouTube, if anybody on YouTube's watching this, then give me a call. Let's talk about it.
I agree. I mean, if you think about it, and just to kind of belabor the point just a little bit more on LinkedIn, that you said there's not a lot of that interaction. As a general rule, my experience of that whole platform is not a lot of interaction. I've posted a lot. I don't get a lot of back and forth. Even in the groups, there's not really a lot of interaction. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just my experience, but YouTube, though, on the other hand, I mean, that's what it's made for. The commenting, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of interaction on that platform. So
Yeah.
huge difference. So let's see, I do have a nerdy question for you about People Love Process, specifically this last video. As I was watching, I noticed that you're set in pixel, or I'm sorry, points for the measurement. The point, your ruler is set to points.
Yeah.
Is that kind of your rule of thumb, or is there a time when you would specifically set it to inches? Is points kind of like your go-to?
If I'm just building and I'm not doing layout, then I build in points just because it's easier math wise, so I try to build in whole numbers. I just found it easier. But if I'm doing a layout like I do, I don't use InDesign unless it's a catalog or something like that. I build one-page ads, posters, business cards, letterhead, all in Illustrator. Their type is still wonky at times, but it's getting a little better. But yeah, if I'm doing a layout like that, then yeah, of course, I use inches to establish my layout. But any graphics, any illustration, logo design, I'm using points all the time.
Make it easy on yourself. Okay. Now, if new designers went to People Love Process, how would you suggest they begin? Is there are there playlists for beginners to follow, or they just sort of play it by ear and find videos that they like? How do you suggest that they begin?
Yeah, I have an answer for that question when it's my LinkedIn learning content. I always tell them just watch my flagship course, Drawing Vector Graphics, and then from there, whatever discipline you want to focus on. It's a little different on the YouTube channel, but if I had to pick one, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but I think it's like the 13 essential tools in Illustrator, something like that. It'll be something like that. If you watch that, that's a good one to start with because it just covers some fundamentals. I've been thinking about doing now you're kind of reinforcing what I've thought of already, that I should do a fundamentals video where going, look, I'm not going to assume you know anything about Illustrator, but maybe you like drawing, but you've never actually created vector art based off of the drawing. I mean, that's what my book was basically all about. And so, yeah, now note to self, put it on my list. Now that's a good idea. It doesn't really matter where you start though, but I think it would be good to have some foundational stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And my next question. So, reflecting on your career and the evolution of the design industry, what advice would you offer high school students who are aspiring to be illustrators?
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to pay for a Creative Cloud license. You can still use like Affinity. That'd be a great app, Affinity Designer specifically for vector art. Once again, the fundamentals of Bezier curves, even though in all my content I'm using Illustrator, unless it's a proprietary feature, you're going to be able to do it fundamentally the same way in Affinity. Because it uses the same open source for the vector building and the math behind it. They have a Photoshop one. That'd probably be the best way to get a Photoshop equivalent. And then if you just start thinking about what you want to do. So let's say you want to do brand identity design, logo design, or you want to create t-shirts. Just start figuring out ideas, Saul Bass, if you haven't gone to college or an art program, is one of the best designers that ever lived. He was my favorite all-time illustrative designer because he really believed in drawing. And if you go on YouTube and you type in Saul Bass talks about drawing, you'll find a video of his that some guy interviewed him in the late 90s. And it's absolutely excellent information. I encourage you to watch that. But the reason why I bring that up is drawing is always going to enable you to come up with better ideas because it actually boosts your cognitive ability when you draw out, or even for that matter, writing down keywords, whatever, just trying to come up with concepts. Because Saul Bass's famous quote is, design is thinking turned visual. And so the more you can be a better thinker, the better creative solutions you're going to come up with. And in our field, I describe a lot of what I do as illustrative design. And all I mean by that, if you've ever seen the Target brand mark for the Target stores, that's graphic design. If you've seen the brand mark for Starbucks, that's illustrative design. And the only difference between the two, they're both logos. The only difference, though, is somewhere in the midst of the creative process, drawing was required to work out how exactly that mermaid, in this case, is going to be shaped and formed. And if you start drawing now, and I'll use my daughter as an example, she is 11. She showed me this drawing, and it almost looked like a little, it wasn't, but it reminded me of a like 1970s pimp, the way she had the character drawn. It wasn't, though. And he was walking down a sidewalk, and she's 11 when she did that. And like a week or two before that, my mom had sent me a box of all this stuff from her house of my drawings from growing up. And one of them, there was a drawing I did in there of some alien thing. I was into Star Wars at the time. And I was 11. She was always good about putting how old I was on the back of it. And I go, hey, Savannah, go get that drawing. And we set them side by side on the ground. I said, just look at these. Don't worry about the topic or whatever. Just look at the quality of the drawing. Which one's better? Well, it was crystal clear. Hers was a fundamentally better drawing than mine was at 11. I go, and so I went out of my way to say, look, if you stick with this, you're going to blow me away. And she's already there. I mean, she'll send me a text with something she drew the day before or whatever. And I'm just like, holy cow, that's like really good, Savannah. So just stick with it. Even if you don't want to be a full-time illustrator, that's not the point. You're going to be able to come up with ideas and kind of refine those shapes. And that's what's going to help your vector building is if you can come up with a sketch, doesn't have to be perfect, but a tight enough one, then it becomes a roadmap you can build on. And then as you're building it, you're going to naturally think, you know, this would look better if I do this a little bit differently. And that's all I do. And it's like, I rarely do I draw something where it's exactly the way I build it. It almost never is, you know?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great advice. I do have, I had one other bonus question that I was going to throw in there, but I'll be quite honest, I didn't think that it was going to be appropriate for this particular video. If you don't mind, my question is, so, I know that you have submitted to the Adobe Illustrator feature ideas in the past, like the one that you did in 2020, I think it was, advocating for Adobe to make it so that we could drag and drop swatches onto the artboard, which, I mean, why not? I mean, that should have been done right away. And I'm curious, whatever became of that request? And then as a follow-up, is there, if you could pick one thing that Adobe has yet to do, what would you suggest they change in it? Update, sorry.
Yeah, the draggable swatches, it wasn't an original idea of mine. It's just the way it worked in freehand that I used 15 years before I ever used Illustrator. You could do that. And I just asked, hey, could you work this in? And I tried to make an argument. This is why it'd be easier to do tonal value comparisons and just make the process easier. And um, I can't remember the name of the forum. It's on an Adobe forum. If you just go request Adobe features, you'll find what the domain is, but it's on there. Just look for draggable swatches and you'll find it. Uh, I got a notice earlier this year through my account email associated with that, that they notified me that they're considering that. So does that mean it's going to come to Illustrator? I don't know. I hope so. That'd be awesome. And then what was your second part of the question?
The follow-up was if you could pick one thing that that you would like Adobe to update that they haven't yet
Oh,
done.
yeah. Okay. Actually, two things. One is the bug they introduced in CS6 that still isn't fixed. It's a snapping bug. I've been hounding them for years on that. 2019, when they invited me to come to New Delhi to be part of a summit they were doing, they invited like 15 creatives over there. I was one of them, and I showed the engineers the snapping bug. I brought my laptop, brought some art, and I go, look, just give me 15 minutes. It'll eventually happen. Then I'll let you experience it. And that's what I did. It did. And I should have taken a picture of all these engineers huddled around my laptop. Whoa, that shouldn't be doing that, you know? And I go, yeah, no doubt. That's why I've been telling you for like, at that time, it was 7 years. Now it's over a decade. So if they could fix that, that'd be great. The other thing is, I really wish they would redo brushes altogether. Like, I think Affinity has it figured out, and they've kind of done it already in Fresco, so it's not like they wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. Where Fresco, you can bring in Photoshop brushes and use it in context with vector art. So it's kind of a hybrid iPad app. Well, Affinity is the same way, but it's desktop. And I just think it's high time that they redo the way brushes are handled and allow you to bring in Photoshop brushes and just improve the vector brush technology. Okay, one last one.
Go for it.
Why no new blend modes in Adobe Illustrator? And that's another idea I put on that same forum, to create a shading blend mode. So if you have color going over different objects that are different colors, and you fill it with the shading blend mode, then it would just like if you go outside and you look at the sunlight casting a shadow from a tree onto a bush that might have colorful flowers and greens and maybe different colored blossoms. And as that shadow goes over those different colors, it's not all the same color. It takes on the value and hue and intensity of each of those base colors it's being cast on. And I don't know if it's possible to code something for a shading feature, but I can tell you right now, if they did that, they would get so much positive feedback. But the problem is with Adobe Illustrator specifically is the ones who develop it never use it to actually create with. So that's trying to get them to understand why is sometimes the hardest part. Like when they came out with Intertwine, I don't know if you know what that is.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, okay, yeah, you can mock something up, but you still have to go back and build it clean. So it might save you a little time to mock it up, but you're not saving any time to actually build it out clean, because you wouldn't want to make final brand assets, for example, if it's a monogram, and keep the intertwine in there. You just ask for problems. And so I posted, and I'm part of the beta team. So I post in the Slack channel they have for that at the time. Just feels like another kind of half-baked feature by Adobe, and their head engineer kind of got mad at me and said, well, what do you mean? You know, I go, well, if you really want me to explain it, I will, but let's do it in a DM. And so we did. And I walked through it and I said, look, if I'm creating a monogram and I used intertwine to get all those overlaps happening, that works okay for a comp. It assumes you don't want any gaps in between it. So it doesn't work in a certain style, even with intertwine. So that's another issue altogether. I go, but let's say you mock it up, but you still have to do all the work manually. So it's not really going to save me a ton of time. I mean, what would really have been cool is if you can use intertwine and then on the properties panel, it says expand intertwine. And if you click that, then it would automatically build it clean. And I had to explain to him what I meant by build it clean. And I go, I don't know if it's possible to do that. Is it possible to do that? And he admitted, oh yeah, we could do that. And I go, then why don't you? And then it became, well, I'm not sure people are going to approve the time to do it. So it became a political thing.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem with Adobe is I think it more gets, features get half baked all the time because nobody is creating with it. Nobody, like if they, I almost would like to create some tutorials that they would have to create so they could understand certain pain points of the creative process and go, now, if you could fix this when you have to deal with this, or fix this when you have to deal with it. And in 2019, when I was there, I offered to work with them for 4 years to help them do just that, but they wouldn't take me up on my offer. They were more concerned that I critique some of their features on social media, and I'm like, whatever, okay. I did my best. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That's awesome insight. And once again, thanks a lot for being here. I appreciate your time. It's been awesome. I can go on for hours.
Well, thanks for having me on. And if anybody has any questions about vector art, just contact me through my People of Process YouTube channel, and I'd be glad to help you.
Excellent. And I'll include all of your links in the description below. So thanks, Vaughn. Thanks again, Vaughn. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. Happy Thanksgiving.